Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Health In Show, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community. And we have with us as guest today Manfred Mueller. He is a homeopath in private practice in California and also the founder of the Homeopathic College. He's a veteran health freedom activist, and in 2003, he authored and helped to introduce the North Carolina Consumer Health Freedom Act, which by 2009 was co-sponsored by the 14th House of Representatives. From 2003 to 2006, he served on the board of Citizen for Healthcare Freedom, CHF, a North Carolina-based health freedom group. He has also served as National Health Freedom Leader with National Health Freedom Action. Manfred is a good friend and the principal lecturer and founder of the Homeopathic College and has been a regular guest on Homeopathy World Community Blog Talk Radio. We're welcoming his return on the Health In Show as a leader in the community promoting health freedom. There's a long list of wonderful things that he has been providing to the homeopathic community and the world at large. He talks on the cancer diathesis, cleansing methodologies, reversing illness, and has provided much information for those seeking alternative methods of healing. And this is really our topic today, the availability and access, both for a practitioner and for a consumer, to access alternative methods of healing. And we're supposed to have on the line with us Diane Miller, and we're waiting for her to call in today. She is a Minnesota attorney, successfully helped to defend a Minnesota farmer from charges of, quote, practicing medicine without a license, unquote. And this is one of the issues that we have to, as consumers and citizens of the United States, be activists to protect our availability to access vitamins, herbs, and information, labeling of products, everything that we want transparency with and availability to. After this court case, the state versus Saunders, Diane Miller proceeded to design health freedom legislation for the state of Minnesota and was the lead lobbyist and legislative consultant to the Minnesota Natural Health Legal Reform Project, responsible for passing the consumer-driven legislation entitled the Minnesota Complementary and Alternative Health Care Freedom of Access Act. And I want you to know that you can probably find some form of health freedom group or organization within your state if you're in the United States. Outside of the United States, I'm not sure exactly what is available to you, but I do believe that Diane has been active nationally and internationally. She designed the first health freedom bill for the state of Minnesota and entitled that bill the Minnesota Complementary and Alternative Health Care Freedom of Access Act. And you can find her, she's a lawyer, at the National Health Freedom Organization, the National Health Freedom Coalition, and on the Health, and I want you to check out also the Health Freedom Expo, which will be June 2013. Okay, who's calling on the line? Is that you, Diane?
Yep, here I am, Diane.
Oh, wonderful. And I was just doing an introduction for your background and getting us up and running today on the show. My regular co-host, which is every Thursday at 1 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio, Homeopathy World Community, and Freedomizer Radio, Alan Phillips, a marvelous advocate for everyone in the United States behind the scenes, whether they know it or not. He's there protecting and securing our rights. He is right now driving in his car, unable to call in or attend this presentation, but I do have one statement from him that I'll tell you a little bit later. So I want to welcome you, Diane.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Wonderful. I'm so excited because I know you have a very busy schedule. And Manfred Mueller, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And we also have calling in from New Delhi, India, Dr. Deepak Sharma of the Orbits Clinic of Homeopathy as our international representative. Welcome.
Thank you, Debbie, and welcome to Manfred. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you.
It is very nice to see you here in the show. Thank you.
We have a truly international program today. So we're ready to go, and if you want to start us off, Diane, would you like to begin telling us, let's say, over the years, what did you learn most concerned the constituents of each state?
Thank you. And I do apologize for my late entry. I was trying to figure out the Skype connection so I could be video, but I wasn't able to do that because of my own technical.
Okay. In the future, you'll return and
yes,
we'll get you going.
I will return and I'll have it down. That would be great.
Okay.
What I learned from constituents across the United States and the world, basically, is that gradually the freedoms that everybody expects are not there anymore. And they don't, some people realize it before they get into a crisis, and some people realize it when they get into a crisis. For example, there's laws that have been established without the consumers or the citizens or the health seekers even realizing it, because they're not at the capitals oftentimes, that take away the right of different practitioners that they like to practice. So they go to try and find a homeopath, and they can't find any, and they don't know why there's not a list in the yellow pages, and they don't understand, and they've read about it on the web, or they know that their grandfather used to be a homeopath, and they don't understand why they can't find a homeopath when they need one. And that's because there's many occupational laws on the state level that have banned a lot of the holistic practitioners and just dominate conventional care. And in the federal arena, there's many laws around substances and shipping of substances and dietary supplements and drugs and homeopathic remedies that impact access to these things. So the constituents are, when they get into a crisis, is when they learn that their freedoms have been infringed upon.
You know what? As you were speaking, I just realized this is a talk about freedom. This is a talk about the freedom to practice and the freedom for information and the freedom of access to this information. And tonight is Passover, so we really are right on time for discussing this. And I'm looking right now at Twitter. Passover is a trending word, and they're talking about Obama. So Obama being the leader of our country on taking initiative to lead us toward freedom. And I hope that that includes medical freedom and alternative access. Manfred or Diane, jump in here anytime.
Well, I think this is Diane. The focus of our work at National Health Freedom Action and Coalition is freedom, because it is not just about what works or what doesn't work. It is actually about what does a person want or need when they're not feeling well. So do they want to sit home and stare out the window, or do they want to go find somebody to talk to, or do they want to go and seek remedies, or do they want to grow remedies in their garden, or do they want to, whatever they want to do. So I think that the focus of our work is what a person in their deepest sense feels like they need to have at a particular time in their healing journey is the essence of our work, to protect that path that they would like to go on. And the homeopaths are so incredibly good at listening to a person and helping them see the pattern and finding them some assistance on the path. And to think about government or institutions or dominant systems suppressing the people that are actually listening to consumers so that they can rise to their greatest level of potential or consciousness is just bizarre. And so we're just changing the paradigm. We're not, like giving somebody a drug to get rid of a symptom. We're in a new age of awareness where we know that healing has to do with the entire person and the entire community that they live in, and we need to have the laws reflect that evolution.
Yes. If I may add something, the United States has always stood for freedoms. It has a wonderful history of freedom in many areas of life, but yet when you look at the medical or healthcare freedoms, America is one of the most monolithic countries in the world. There's only one kind of medicine. If you have to go to the ER or to a hospital, there's only one kind of medicine available. You can go to India, for example. Like the gentleman I understand is listening from India. You can actually choose to go to a homeopathic hospital and see a homeopathic practitioner. These are government sanctioned forms of medicine there. In the United States, their mention doesn't even exist in the legislature, in the statutes. The powers that be in medicine are simply they only accept one form of medicine. And I think consumers are becoming more and more aware, as Diane has said, that their rights have been eroded. It wasn't always this way in this country. In the 19th century, people had access to a wide variety of different medical services. But gradually, over time, these freedoms of access have eroded. Today, it's pharmaceutical medicine. It's surgery. That's the only options that are offered. And I think people are looking for more.
I agree with you. So what is it that you're doing? I understand that we've been legislatively active, and we have lost the freedoms over the past number of decades, and it seems as if these restrictions have gotten tighter and tighter. In the UK, they've lost access to vitamins and herbs. The Codex is something that we have to be concerned about. The lobbyists for the pharmaceuticals have gotten stronger and stronger and have influenced what happens legislatively, which restricts the practice of medicine for the alternative complementary practitioners.
Would you like to answer that, Diane?
Yes, I think that, well, first of all, the global corporations that have lots of money to put into legislative efforts, and they have a lot of lobbyists, can move legislation that infringes upon our freedom, just like the genetic modification organisms. I mean,
GMO. Yeah.
Going forward on individual states to demand GMO labeling, but legislators are afraid to vote for it, and they've been told by these lobbyists there's nothing wrong with GMOs, we really need it to save all the starving people in the world. And those themes are basically very impregnated into the legislative system. So if the consumers do not show up, or if the citizens of the world don't show up, these large dominant cultures of money will predominate. And I think in California, when they tried to last year get the labeling for GMOs, that was a very good example of what is happening across the board with homeopathy, with naturopathy, with everything. It's like who shows up, and they only lost by like 2% of the vote. So the big corporate money was able to convince half of the Californians that, they shouldn't do this, and the other half of Californians said, definitely we want it. And we're going to win that fight as citizens become more educated about the truth of what is happening and that GMOs can kill you or can harm your long-term health. So I think the state of Washington is having an initiative where the consumers, the citizens actually get to vote on the referendums, and it's not in the legislative process. It's actually they got enough signatures and approval to get the vote. So we're all going to focus on the state of Washington And one by one, these states are going to have enough conscious consumers to change that particular law. But there's a lot of areas that need help. And so, for example, in homeopathy itself, the occupations are regulated by state, by state, by state. And so in each state, they have made laws over the last 100 years that say anything that you do to heal or prevent or cure another person is the practice of medicine. And then you have to have a license to practice medicine. And if you don't have a license, you go to jail. So one of the first times on a state level that I was aware of this incredibly broad law, and why I sent everybody in jail then, is I helped represent a farmer who was telling people that they could strengthen their immune system with fresh colostrum from his dairy cows. And he cured former Congressman Bedell of Lyme's disease in that way by using his fresh colostrum. And they did a 2-year undercover investigation for substance use, calling milk a drug, and then they decided, no, we'll let the state go after him. So the state went after him for the practice of medicine without a license. And we worked on that case for 3 years and got 2 hung juries because the juries weren't going to put a farmer in jail that was a dairy farmer. And so finally they withdrew all the charges, and at that point is when I realized the seriousness of the infringement of freedoms. And we went forward with a bunch of my friends, and we passed a law in Minnesota to have a safe harbor to protect the rights of people that are not licensed occupations, nurses, chiropractors, and doctors, to do the healing arts without going to jail. And then a lot of states started calling us, so we designed the National Health Freedom Action to address these basic local issues of infringement on freedom of speech. And we're doing that full time in 30 states. It's like a group will come forward, the dietitians will come forward, and they'll say, we want to practice nutritional services, but unless you're a licensed dietitian, nobody else can say anything about nutrition. So we try to defeat those bills and put in a health freedom bill. Or the naturopathic physicians say, we went to these 4 schools and we're the only ones that can practice naturopathy, and so we defeat those bills and put in a safe harbor for all the unlicensed people that practice complementary, alternative, or holistic healing arts that are not doing things dangerous that rise to the level of harm that would require a state police power to have SWAT teams go in and take somebody off to jail.
Maybe this would be a good time for me to just read the statement from Alan Phillips, who is our local North Carolina representative of Health Freedom, and he also writes white papers and supports legislation around the country. When I told him we were going to have a show, he said, and this is regarding an upcoming bill in North Carolina about naturopathic practice, the way I read the parts of the bill that define the practice of naturopathic medicine and who can or can't practice it, it looks to me like a rerun of past efforts with the same project. It appears to be seeking to enable a very narrowly defined group of naturopathic physicians to take over virtually all non-allopathic care, with the possible exception of psychic healing. I don't know. And that is not already covered by other licensure, such as massage therapists, chiropractors, and acupuncturists. He says, I support the general concept of naturopathic licensure, but object adamantly to any such law that would make criminals out of any unlicensed alternative healthcare practitioner. It would be fine for a licensed naturopath to boast about his or her licensure, and consumers would be welcome to decide if they prefer a licensed practitioner to an unlicensed one. But that option should be maintained. NDs do not, for example, necessarily know more about homeopathy than a homeopathic practitioner or physician. NDs are generalists by definition. So this bill, as past failed attempts to enact such licensure, again goes too far by criminalizing the non-licensed practice of alternative health care. Licensure can potentially help consumers to distinguish between varying qualities of educational background and training, but it should not be allowed to be used as a tool to excluding market competition altogether. And to me, I feel as if this type of legislation is fear-based mongering. It's threatening the people who have knowledge and ability and are making it impossible for them to practice their art. Take it away from there. That's Alan's statement, and that little ending tag was me speaking from my heart.
Well, if I understand correctly, Dr. Phillips is saying that this, if the naturopathic physicians and if they wish to get a license board or licensing board for themselves in a state, nevertheless, the language of their bill indicates that they're trying to do this at the expense of other professions, other occupations that are currently not listed in the statutory language, and they're basically trying to make a monopoly for themselves to be able to practice all other forms of alternative care in that state. So this seems wrong. And while we support the naturopaths, and many naturopathic physicians are also trained in homeopathy, they're trained in Chinese medicine, they're trained in many other forms of care, but much of their training is introductory. And so the professionals and the experts in the field, like, for example, homeopaths who specialize in homeopathy, may actually be able to offer better services in homeopathy. So professional homeopaths is the group that I represent for the North American Society of Homeopaths. Those are people who have trained for years in homeopathy and have become certified. They have currently a voluntary self-regulatory system where they choose to, after their education, after their training with schools, they choose to sit for a national exam, and their basic qualifications can be seen by anyone who looks at their background. And this is an alternative solution to creating licensing laws for new professions that has been developed by some of the health freedom activists. In California, for example, an exemption was created for health freedom professions, for alternative health care professions under the Health Freedom Act, an exemption from the medical licensing law so long the practitioners obligate themselves to not do surgery, to not do x-rays and prescribe conventional medication. In other words, they're limited to their own practice, say homeopathy or acupuncture, naturopathy. And although acupuncture, I think, is licensed in California, but in any case, this is an alternative way of solving this dilemma. Since this Health Freedom Act was passed in 2002 in California, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of practitioners are able to openly engage in their profession. They are obligating themselves to disclose to their clients their education, their background, and also precisely what they are doing in their practice. And this helps the consumer to make decisions as to which practitioner they would like to hire for their health restoration care. And so there are other ways, much simpler ways, much less expensive ways, that we can make access to alternative care available.
Okay. Anyone else want to say something? I think that... go ahead.
I want to take it back to the conversation of freedom, because I always ask people, what do you think the role of government is in what you can access in terms of a practitioner? Because we have a free society, and our government is there to help us and protect us. And on the state level, The government only has the ability to use its police power, its guns, its SWAT teams, its et cetera, to protect the public. Otherwise, we get to do what we want to do. We get to mow lawns and we get to paint pictures and, we get to be free in our vocations following them. So when the state is saying you cannot do a dangerous act, it should say that it would prohibit people that are doing dangerous things.
Right.
But not all of healing is dangerous. In other words, just because you're doing a healing act or supporting somebody on their life path doesn't mean you're doing an inherently dangerous thing. So what we're saying is the state only has the right, and some states have now passed laws that say this, they only have the right to license an occupation when that occupation presents an imminent risk of harm to the public. So when these groups go forward to get licensing, they're going forward saying, we're really dangerous and you have to license us, because if we don't get a license, all these consumers are getting hurt by these terrible people. So they do these terrible arguments at the legislature saying how dangerous alternative health people are. And that's very sad, but the only reason they're doing that is so that they can get their bill passed. So actually they're promoting the concept of fear. Mm-hmm. And so what I say is, do you think that you should have government permission to do a healing act? Because that's how Europe runs. That's how all other countries run. There's the presumption that the government is giving you permission to do things. And that's not the United States. The United States has said, we get to do things, and you have to prove that they're dangerous before you stop me from doing this. So in the EU and other countries, they're setting up a list of substances that people can sell. Here's the proactive list. And if you're not on this list, you don't get to sell it or buy it. And that's not how the United States Dietary Supplement Act is. The Dietary Supplement says these things are foods. Everybody gets to have access to them. And government, you can't take them off the shelf unless you prove that they're dangerous. So we in the United States have a different mindset for the globe, for the planet, because of our inherent wish to respect liberty and honor that. But we're not against licensing. It's just that we would only like licensing to happen for people that are doing dangerous acts. For example, the naturopathic physicians, they're hybrid. They do homeopathy, they do naturopathy, they do acupressure, physical manipulation, but they also do minor surgery. They give out drugs, they give out antibiotics, and so they're a hybrid. So they go get licensure, but instead of getting licensure just for their allopathic dangerous half, they put in all of natural health. And so so what we're trying to do is go in there and say, hey, we're fine if you want to get licensure because you're going to do minor surgeries. But we want an exemption in your bill that says absolutely no one else, all unlicensed people that are not doing these other things are okay to practice, and they will not be criminal under your scope of practice. And the interesting thing about this is that these professional people that want licensure have come to a place in their life where they think they're better, and they want the market, and they want insurance coverage. Those reasons for getting licensure are not based on American law. Licensure is only because you're dangerous, not because you can get insurance, not because it helps your practice, not because you want to have a market concept. It's only because you're dangerous. And when people say, yeah, let them go get licensure because then they can get coverage under Obamacare, and I'm going, wait a minute, what about the American concept of freedom? So we're trying to teach people across the United States and at the legislature when it is appropriate to licensure and how to get the least restrictive means possible. Because in the Constitution, when you have two fundamental rights that are conflicting with each other, like the freedom of speech and the freedom to procreate, you wanna make sure that you're regulating only in the least restrictive means in order not to infringe upon the consumers or the citizens' right to survive, to heal themselves in the way that they deem proper.
God bless you. I want to say amen. I know that we have a caller. I want to just let you know that on Facebook, Homeopathy World Community, to announce this show today, I put a quote from Ronald Reagan. I wouldn't say he's my favorite president, but he did say something that I like. He's yours. Okay, great, Amnon. He said, and you're going to like this, government exists to protect us from each other. Where government has gone beyond his limits is in deciding to protect us from ourselves. You like that? Oh,
Good one.
great. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it does feel like domination, doesn't it? And who's calling in the line today?
Hey, Debbie, this is Kavita.
Hi, Kavita Kukanor from Michigan.
Yes. So, hi, Diane. Hi, Manfred and Dr. Sherman. I'm not.
Hello.
So, Diane, I have a question. As an attorney, what do you advise for a homeopath to make their state health freedom?
Good question. What do you recommend for a person in their state to make homeopathy health freedom?
Are you calling from Michigan?
Yes.
Michigan has a health freedom law already drafted, and it was
Right.
how you get that passed is how you take back your freedom that was taken away from you in 1910 or 1918. You have to pass that law, and if the citizens do not go to the Capitol en masse and demand that law be passed, it won't pass because there's no corporate, big money behind you with a big lobbyist going to try and pass that bill. They're not wanting that bill to pass. The citizens are the ones that have to show up on that bill. And the reason that my understanding is that the reason that the Michigan bill did not move forward is that the citizens did not show up at the Capitol. The legislators did not hear enough from citizens to think that it was moving up on the priority ladder.
Did you understand?
So, Diane, I'm sorry. So, when you said like the citizen did not move and pass that law as a capital, so as a homeopath, what is my role in that area?
As a homeopath, if I were homeopaths in Michigan, I would join the Michigan Health Freedom Coalition, go to their, get them to be meeting every week and say, what's our next strategy? Raise enough money to hire a full-time lobbyist at the Capitol to pass the bill.
Okay, thank you.
It seems money talks.
Yes.
Lobbyist talks. In other words, it's kind of like when you're at the Capitol, it's like playing chess. There's all kinds of different people at the Capitol trying to pass their own bills because everything is important. But if you're not at the Capitol, then you really don't have a say in the conversation. So when you hire a lobbyist or two, like I was the lobbyist for the Minnesota bill, the first one that passed for health freedom. And I have used homeopathy for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. And so I was very determined to get that bill passed, and I had never lobbied before in my life. But I wanted to pass it, and so I agreed to learn how to lobby with one of my friends, and we learned how to lobby together. We went around the Capitol, and we lobbied the bill for 2 years, or a year and a half. So learning how to lobby for me was challenging and exciting. And if we would have had the money, we would have hired a lobbyist that already knew how to lobby and knew how to do all that. Sometimes a combination of hiring a lobbyist who they need to have the understanding and the passion for the issue to be a good lobbyist for this issue because it's so embedded in freedom concepts. And
if I may add, sometimes it's also helpful to directly talk, get in conversation with powerful people who are legislators or who are with powerful opposition to the bill. So, for example, in New Mexico, the work of one single individual really perhaps passed the New Mexico Health Freedom Act when I think he was administrator at a local Ayurvedic college, struck up contact with a gentleman on the, I believe, in the Medical Society. And the Medical Society in other states had been the main opposition to the passage of health freedom bills, even though often medicine would benefit from health freedom bills in many ways. However, this was the job of this individual who was able to speak to an individual at the Medical Society. He was able to convince him not to oppose the health freedom bill in that state. And that single act made the biggest difference in passing that bill. So there may be other activities other than lobbying that make a difference.
Right.
Raising funds certainly is a very helpful thing to do. And NASH, North American Society of Homeopaths, is currently in the process of supporting and forming state associations in every state. And we expect our supporters in every state to get together and form coalition with other professions that are engaged in supporting these health freedom bills.
I agree with that, Manfred. In the different states that have passed, in the 8 states, most of those states have either had a relationship with someone on the health committee or in the government or the Attorney General's office or the board, or they've had one or two people that champion the bill all the way through. For example, Win Werner in New Mexico. He dedicated 1.5 years or 2 years of his life to doing that work at the Capitol, and he was able to fill the hearing room. He had the Attorney General explain the bill. He had very good relationships, and so he was a champion. And I know that the Minnesota Legal Reform Project also was a champion group of 12 people that moved the Minnesota bill without a paid lobbyist. But when you don't have that champion that can spend time at the Capitol, and they need to spend time with these people that are in power positions and make friends with them, and for example, in Colorado right now, there are 2 lobbyists working for the health freedom bill that's moving right now that was introduced last week. But there's also people that are at the Capitol with those lobbyists, talking to different people, talking to the Medical Society to explain it to them. So they have a joint effort going in Colorado.
I want to thank everyone who is with us today. We have a very active chat going on, and I know Diane and Manfred, you're not able to see that right now. We have a question about the 8 states. Which are the 8 states that have health freedom laws? And Ruth is asking, how do we get information on the talking points, such as what Manfred is talking about today? The medical establishment could better benefit from health freedom. So I'm sure that you can give us some resources and answer which ones are the 8 states with health freedom laws.
Our website, nationalhealthfreedom.org, has an information center, and in the information center it has a list of all 8 states, and it shows the laws that passed. Okay. And the eight states are Minnesota, California, Rhode Island, Idaho, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Arizona.
Thank you. And now I assume that they would be also going to the nationalhealthfreedom.org website for further information if they want to become legislatively active or just self-educated about talking points.
Yes, the nationalhealthfreedom.org website will take them to the educational page, the coalition page, and on the right-hand side there's a click about action. And so if they're interested in action, that will take them all to the lobbying organizations page and all of the bills that we're tracking right now. We just put an alert out on 15 GMO bills. We just put an alert out on Colorado and Arkansas, Maryland, a number of bills with occupational bills. And the latest one that we don't have an alert out on, but we plan to this week, is North Carolina's naturopathic physician bill, because it does not have adequate exemptions for the unlicensed practitioners. They gave an attempt, but they wrote the language instead of asking the alternative health community, and the language is inadequate to protect them.
Do you have a comment, Manfred?
Yes, I think anyone who is certainly anyone who is a homeopathic practitioner in any state is welcome to contact the NASH board, NASH leadership. I myself be happy to talk to you about what you can do, and I definitely urge you to check into the National Health Freedom Action website. It will tell you the whole process of getting started in a legislative campaign that will support, even to author your own bill for that for your state. Diane Miller has offered her help and has helped us in many cases with direct language advice, and also those in North Carolina, to the credit of the naturopathic physicians. There's a whole group in North Carolina of naturopathic physicians that understand the problem with monopolies, and that have contacted us and have looked into language in the past, and they agreed to language. But it's strange, the National Organization of Naturopathic Physicians seem to come back paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to a lobbyist, come back introducing bills that do not include some of this language that would avoid the problem. We have actually said openly we'll support their naturopathic physicians bill because there is a reason for them to. Last time Diane Miller said they do like to get state regulations because they want to have and want to engage as part of their profession, in part, as part of their profession, in activities that are generally regulated by the state, such as surgery and so forth. These are legitimate uses of a licensing bill. And so I want to expressly mention those naturopathic physicians who have worked with us in these bills. However, unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be the standard practice of the national group.
Well, that is a great comment, Manfred, Diane, because in Minnesota and in California, the naturopathic physicians are registered doctors, and they also are states that have the Health Freedom Foundational Bill for Safe Harbor.
That's
and
right.
Those Health Freedom bills went forward first, and then the licensing bill just referred back to them. Right now we have a situation in Pennsylvania where the naturopathic physicians actually put in a really broad-based amendment, an exemption for all of alternative health. So we are standing down on that bill. Even though the Health Freedom Bill has not passed to exempt out of the practice of medicine, at least they would be exempted out of the practice of naturopathic physicians.
It seems that it is possible to create legislation that would preserve the rights of the consumer and other alternative healers, as well as provide licensure. One of the questions that I had was, why do consumers need special legislation? Isn't our Bill of Rights and Constitution enough? And I feel as if you've basically answered that question for us. I mean, but people might think, why do we need to keep changing these laws or adding these bills?
Well, these laws were made when licensing came back into our century in the early 1900s, and it said all of healing is the practice of medicine. Nobody else can do it. So there's been this constant, the nurses say, oh my gosh, I don't want to be charged for practicing medicine. Let's go get our own licensing law. And the chiropractor says, I don't want to be charged for practice of medicine. Let's get our own licensing law. So there's just been this constant. It's taken 100 years just to get to the point where I'm saying, no, I don't want another licensing law, because we're not talking about things that are dangerous. We're talking about, natural health vocations. And so we're just at another stage of reclaiming, getting out of that dominant paradigm that the only doctor knows best, because there is so much information amongst the actual culture about healing. To ban healing in itself was a mistake, and it was done by a special interest group. Even before women had the right to vote, it was passed. This was done a long time ago.
Okay. Manfred. Or is this Dr. Deepak Sharma from New Delhi?
Yes. Then I have a question. what are the points by the government? That's why they are not approving the homeopathy. Is there any website to show the questions? And when was the last time law is revised? I saw a website that is registercorp.com, and he returned the US Congress passed a law in 1938 declaring that homeopathic remedies are to be regulated by the US. So the law was revising in 1938. Is it true?
Yes.
Yes, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act was passed in 1938, and it incorporated the homeopathic pharmacopoeia as a separate standard of drug regulation from the conventional pharmacopoeia. So we do have protection in the United States for homeopathic medicines under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. And the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is the agency that regulates the marketing and distribution of homeopathic drugs. However, even though this is the case, the practice or the profession of homeopathy, and there are really two types of professions that have developed historically in the United States. Homeopathy was practiced initially by what doctors would refer to as lay practitioners. These were non-physicians who took up the practice of homeopathy. And this was done in the 19th century. Often there were far more lay practitioners of homeopathy than there were physicians who practiced homeopathy. But in the United States, homeopathy flourished during the 19th century, even with physicians. By the turn of the century, beginning of the 20th century, we had about approximately 25% of American physicians had training in homeopathy. There were over 100 homeopathic hospitals in this country, and most major university medical schools offered homeopathy training to physicians. This changed after the so-called Flexner Report in 1910. After that, funding was withdrawn for the homeopathic sections of medical schools. The rumor was spread that homeopathic and naturopathic and other alternative or natural healing methods were unscientific, and gradually these therapies collapsed. Unlike in other countries, I understand in India this is not the case. So what I'm saying is, in the United States, there's two issues. One of them is the availability of homeopathic drugs. The other one is the availability of homeopathic care. Homeopathic care is right now very, very, very minimal. Less than 1% of American physicians know anything about homeopathy. Most of them do not train in homeopathy. Even those that do train amount to about 24 who have actual registered education and certification in homeopathy. There are several hundred non-physicians that have training and certification in homeopathy, but in most states, they are not recognized by the state government, so they practice in an uncertain legal environment. The purpose of these health freedom laws would be to free the practice not only of these homeopathic practitioners, but also of herbal practitioners, of naturopathic practitioners, and many other alternative forms of healthcare practice. And it would make available these services not just by the few, but by the hundreds, if not by the thousands, because that's really what it's clear that the American public has asked for this. More than 10 years ago, in the so-called White House report by the Clinton administration, this report concluded that a majority of Americans are looking for alternative care. And the report recommended that legislative changes or laws be enacted in the states and perhaps even on the federal level to help along the the provision of services in these alternative practices, but not much has happened over the last 12 years. Not much comparatively. Americans are pretty much still confronted with the fact that the only care available to them is pharmaceutical-driven medical care. And that is, as Diane Miller has so well explained, simply due to the fact that legislators apparently don't listen to the general public. They listen to the lobbyists that show up in their office and that finance their campaigns. And this must change.
Do we have a caller?
Yes.
Who's calling in, please? Oh, they hung up. I just picked up one little tidbit, Manfred. It says that the American public spent $33.9 billion, with a B, out of pocket on complementary and alternative medicine. This is a message to the people who are writing our laws. This is a message to the government and to the medical profession that people are willing to spend their money for other types of health care besides surgery and big pharma drugs.
Yes,
At the legislature, the Congress. Go ahead.
Yes, this is the reason that you must questioning to the FDA to change the law, because there is a very, very big difference between 1938 and 2013, and there are a lot of changes in the homeopathic dilutions and homeopathic researches, and if the cases are present in the India or anywhere else, there are many proved cases which shows the homeopathy will work.
Yes, so from India, Dr. Deepak Sharma was saying that homeopathy has evolved over time, and there's a lot of data, and many, many millions of people are using it to show that it does work. Do we have a caller now? Okay, who's calling in?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
You're going to have to walk away from your computer.
Okay. I'm walking away.
Yeah, because we usually ask folks who call in to turn the sound off of their speakers. Go ahead.
Okay, Deb?
Yes.
It's Nancy Gales. How are you?
Nancy, wonderful. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Dr. Nancy Gales. I'm a former president emeritus of the National Center for Homeopathy. I'm now the director of public education and advocacy. And like Diane, I taught myself how to do this also. So my comment is about the fact that, yes, we are spending $33.9 billion on alternative care, but the Affordable Care Act has effectively disabled us from using our savings accounts to pay for this. They took away alternative over-the-counter therapies, over-the-counter products we could have bought, which is homeopathy, and they have made the restriction that in order to choice and access to your other practitioners, like chiropractors, who in 11 states have homeopathy in this scope of practice, you'd first have to go to your medical doctor, get a prescription to go to buy your homeopathic remedy or to utilize any other practitioner, which is completely, they wouldn't do it because it's out of their scope. They're not allowed to do it, and it doesn't happen. So the ACA has truly disabled us from using, from choice and access to these practitioners. And I'm wondering, we're advancing that at the National Center for Homeopathy and with the Integrated Healthcare Policy Consortium, our campaign to work with the health savings account restrictions. Is anyone else doing anything? Or Diane, I'd love to know your comments on that.
I always think that when the government's going full blast with the global initiatives that are happening on the planet right now, the best way I can support my time is to make sure that a homeopath can practice in their local little town, because these laws are going to change, and politics is going to change. The party system's going to change. The global money's going to change. And what Obamacare looks like today is not going to look like what it's going to look like in 5 years. So for me, it's like we know people, when they get into a crisis will go pay their own money, and if they don't have money, they'll find a friend, and they'll go get what they need. But if that person cannot offer those services, they will not get what they need. So the focus that I have is to make sure that every single homeopath that is trained to be a homeopath can speak and do homeopathy in their state, whether they get paid or not, to save people's lives. And that the drugs are available to us, the over-the-counter drugs are still available to us in the co-ops, in the grocery stores, wherever we can get them, so that no matter where this global economy is going to take us and the restrictions on freedoms, that we have our local freedoms. I mean, literally, I think that's the crisis that we are in terms of liberty on the planet. The corporates are trying to take, to narrow they're going for perpetual markets.
And they're trying to shut down as you say, right now we must have a lot of gratitude for those who went before us to have access to the homeopathic remedies, because they fought really hard for that. And
so did the dietary supplements. I mean, the people that protected
right.
homeopathic remedies and dietary supplements as over-the-counter,
yes,
that needs to be preserved, and the freedom of speech to practice needs to be preserved, because the politics is big, and people need to know how to make their own remedies.
Yes,
well,
there
is one short of light coming through with the ability for consumers to access, to have choice, and to access homeopathic practices through their licensed CAM physicians, like myself. I'm a chiropractor. In 11 states, homeopathy is within our scope of practice, and now through the state health insurance exchanges, we have Section 2706, the non-discrimination piece in the ACA, which is non-discrimination. Health insurance has to include those practitioners in. So what we're seeing as chiropractors is we're going to be able, if you have it in your scope of practice, the health insurers have to pay you for that same treatment that they would pay a medical doctor. So we're starting to get a little more ability through chiropractic, in my case, to employ homeopathic practices and have the people then have more choice and access to it through that, because chiropractors are licensed in 50 states. So we do have a big consumer, a big following. So again, the more access people have, the more consumers will speak up, and I think I see that as a way to get more access to homeopathy.
I agree with that. That each opportunity where you can get access nailed down in the system is important, but the real issue with that is, okay, here's a good example of how this could play out. You have a chiropractic statute. You put homeopathy in the statute as part of the scope of practice. Go down to the bottom of the statute and says, anybody who's practicing chiropractic within the definition of chiropractic has to have a license. So now the chiropractics, I'm just telling you how this plays out because it happens in naturopathic statutes too. Mm-hmm. Now that board can go after a homeopath that is not licensed because they're practicing. So these turf wars are what makes me crazy. In fact, the naturopathic physician board went after a homeopath in Iowa because homeopathy was in the naturopathic scope of practice, and then it said you have to have a license to practice homeopathy. So I
totally agree with you on this. Agree with you on this.
Well, I hope that everybody can understand.
I just want to say,
happening.
Whenever the chiropractic people put homeopathy in their practice act, if they are really supportive of liberty, they will put an exemption in their practice act as well, like Pennsylvania has done right now in their naturopathic physician bill, that make sure that liberty is protected. And I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of invested interest groups and trade associations that have that breadth of courage to try and do that.
You are exactly right. It's not even courage, it's education. They are not informed or educated about the fact that they need to do that, and I know that from the New Jersey chiropractic bill that was passed after 50 years. They finally had the ability to practice nutrition. And what they did was they put homeopathy within the nutrition language, so that, and then said you can have 30 hours of continuing education credits in nutrition, and still that would be the practice of homeopathy. And at the time I was president of the National Center, I really worked very, very diligently with their licensing board and got nowhere because they were so focused on expanding their scope that they did not want to rock the boat and include one other thing. And so I think it's about education, really. And now you have to sort of go back around and through the back door and get the chiropractors to understand, now, wait a minute, this is in your scope. This is homeopathy is very different from nutrition, and how to re-educate. And it's a long, long haul, but I think education is the key here, and they just don't know.
Well, I think, for instance, in Colorado right now, the naturopathic physicians don't want to put the traditional naturopaths out of business. So they looked at our amendments for safe harbor to put on their bill. But then they go take their bill to the legislature and the Department of Regulation, and the medical board is saying, no, we'll license you, but we won't take this freedom piece. So then they dump the freedom piece. They get all the health freedom people angry at them because they're not doing, anything that helps the homeopaths. And it's just crazy because they're trying to get their bill through, so they're only focused on what they want themselves, and they're willing to give up everything for the rest of the people.
I want to send another ray of hope out, and that is the Integrative Healthcare Policy Consortium, of which I sit as a member of the Board of Directors for Partners for Health, representing the National Center for Homeopathy. We are working diligently as a coalition to bring together all of these practices who are part of the integrative healthcare delivery system, and to eliminate, to address, to communicate about, and to hopefully eliminate this turf war issue. So there's a whole big movement coming, planning for a big conference next year, and I'm going to keep in touch with you about this, Diane, because I'd love for your voice to be represented. But just so the listeners know, we're really working on this on another level in coalition to make everybody play well together and to understand the principles underlying freedom of every person to practice, according to their human rights.
Well, I think that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. One of the aspects that I want people to keep in mind is that when you say these homeopaths or the freedom movement is about the threshold of harm. It's not about whether you call yourself a homeopath or a naturopath or a qigong artist or, my daughter does the golden key method. All kinds of, there's thousands and thousands of ways to bring the person back into a balanced state, and they're not named. So when you're working in a systemology, you're thinking, okay, let's get 50 vocations at this table, but that's not really about freedom. It's a great conversation and it's important, but the aspect of everyone else on the planet, like people have the inherent right to heal each other and to say what they know. And even if you have, 5 weeks of homeopathy, that you can share that with somebody else, or even if you're an herbalist that has their own farm and that's all you do, and you never went to school but you know plants, or you're doing the Paralandra method. That is what the freedom conversation's about. It's not more about what kind of practitioners out there. It's about making sure that the government does not shut down healing that is not in their system.
Totally agree, and I can't thank you enough for all your long and diligent work in this, and I know it's not easy to stick your head above the water, and you've just done a fine job, so let me just be in gratitude to you and let you know that.
Thanks, Nancy, and you too.
Hey, guys, I have a question. This is Amnon. From kind of like on a business angle. If I own a GNC store, where am I going to be if that happened?
If what happened?
If a law was passed that I'm going back to your farmer.
He's wondering if the person who works in the store is able to provide information free of charge information about the vitamins, the supplements, the homeopathic remedies in the store. Or
Right.
is that person practicing medicine without a license?
Yes, this is a very important issue at the Capitol. I try to teach people there is a difference between selling something and practicing. So when you're selling something, you have the ability to do whatever the FDA gives you, the labeling of the bottle. You can say what it does. But you can't say this can cure your cancer and here's an article about it, because that becomes labeling and then it becomes a drug. So you have to stay within the structure, function, claims, and follow all the federal laws about selling retail, right? However, if somebody walks into your store and says, I have diabetes and I want to know what you think I should take. Immediately when they say that to you, whatever you say to them, because they're asking you for advice, could trigger the states regulate occupations and federal regulates the products. But the state occupation says if you offer or undertake to help prevent, cure, treat a disease, you're practicing, right? So here you go. You know that the person in front of you has a disease and they're asking you for advice. And so right away you have to think, okay, if I open my mouth here, what's going to happen to me? And so when you have a health freedom law, an exemption to licensing, that health freedom law says if you offer advice to a person, as long as you're not giving, puncturing their skin, giving out drugs or, the whole prohibited conduct list, and as long as you're telling them you're not a doctor and stuff, give out your disclosures, that you can go ahead and speak. So the health food stores, they are walking that line on a daily basis.
Interesting.
And some of the health food stores, like there's a couple naturopaths in South Carolina who had a store of their own, but they also took consultations in a back room. So they would tell people, about the supplements and stuff. But they also had a store. And 10 armed officers came in to their store, put them in handcuffs, and loaded up on semis all their computers and their products last year, and took them away to jail because they were practicing medicine without a license.
Wow.
So you're walking a line between making sure that you know what the state laws are about practicing medicine, practicing natural health care, and the federal laws about what you can say about your products. And those are two different areas.
And then what if you do it at home? What if my daughter
sell or practice?
No, practice. My daughter comes in and she said, "Dad, I know you're taking all these remedies. I've got a headache. What do you recommend? What do you think I should take?"
Many states have exemptions to the Medical Practice Act that says if you're doing home remedies or, helping a family member with a home remedy. But many states don't have that.
Okay.
It's interesting to read the list of exemptions to the Medical Practice Act. It's like, oh, we really didn't mean chiropractors, and we really didn't mean nurses. But like Massachusetts has, we didn't mean clairvoyance. And in Iowa it says, oh, well, we didn't really mean people that give spring water to other people from their farm. And in Minnesota now, we have the exemption for all the alternative health care. Well, we have a list of 22 things, including colostrum from your farm. But the list of exemptions is in the Medical Practice Act in every state. It's very interesting to read. And most states, I think every state, has Christian Scientist or spiritual healing. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is that you have the state culture, which each state is extremely unique. I've been to almost every state capital, and they're just so cool. It's like we have little subcultures in our United States that people forget. We have very strong state identities, and that list reflects their concept of healing, Like in Louisiana, there's curanderos, and it is very fascinating to look at that list. And I think Win Werner in New Mexico's law included all of the indigenous names in there. And even in Montana, when we tried to pass the health freedom law there, we put an exemption to the exemption for the Native American tribes out there, so that they wouldn't have to fill out their Client Bill of Rights, because they should be inherently free in terms of their indigenous tribal nature.
Interesting.
It becomes extremely complicated, doesn't it, Manfred? I mean,
yes, sometimes it's actually helpful, and we were sometimes able to take advantage of some of those existing exemptions. So, for example, in North Carolina is one of those states that has the domestic exemption. You can prescribe as a say a head of a household to your daughter and give her a remedy for her headache. That's legal and does not constitute the practice of medicine. And when the Integrative Medicine Center was formed in conjunction with the University of North Carolina School of Medicine in Chapel Hill, there was a number of consultant practitioners available, and a lot of hospital patients had for years been asking for alternative care, and they can't provide it, largely because many of these practices do not have legal sanction in North Carolina. So what the school decided to do is look into ways they could get involved, and one of the ways was they came up with was allow some of these alternative or integrative practitioners to still tend to patients at the Memorial Hospital there, if they were refraining from actually physically giving their medicines, like homeopaths, for example, giving the homeopathic medicine to the patient, and simply there just as consultants. So they could be there providing information, this and that medicine would be appropriate for you, and then family members were allowed to give the medicine. This was one way they worked around the law, but you can see from that how tricky this can be and how difficult it can be sometimes for patients, especially in hospitals, to have access to homeopathic or other alternative care.
Yeah, that's really the trick. It's very tricky. I've been in a number of hospitals where the nurse says, "No, I can't give that vitamin C," or "No, I can't give that homeopathic remedy. That would be, prescribing something, and the family member has to give it." And some nursing homes say, "No, you can't give it, so you have to wait till they go out of the room." You're sneaking vitamins into your elder person. It's just crazy. I think it's fascinating what Arizona did, and Vega Rosenberg, homeopath, just went to the legislature and asked for an amendment, and they didn't at first give an amendment and protect homeopathy. But I'm going to read to you the exemption in the Arizona law now that the legislature actually agreed to. Instead of saying, homeopathy is exempt because that's already licensed in Arizona, they said it's exempt if it's the practice of providing treatment of the spiritual vital force in accordance with Hahnemannian principles through the use of remedies that are diluted beyond the concentration of substances in drinking water and prepared in the manner described in the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States.
That's absolutely beautiful.
And it's in Arizona law now. It's just a regular citizen went to the Capitol and got that passed, and that's basically what it takes. It takes people to understand the depth of the problem and go right down there to the local law and say, "Sorry, we are here, we're in the state, and we're not doing your thing, but this is what we want protection from."
I want to repeat that. It takes people, it takes citizens, it takes activists, it takes leaders, it takes you to actually keep our freedoms, our health freedoms, our freedom to speak out even, because people are being shut down. I read news the past month about somebody who just has a nutrition website, and just talking about diet could be restricted in some locations. Was that in North Carolina, Manfred?
It's actually the case in many states where the dietitians' laws, licensing laws, were passed. And people who have knowledge of nutrition cannot engage in their profession because of these dietitians' licensing laws, because now the dietitians are licensed only to give advice on nutrition.
That is true. In Illinois, we had a very big battle this past year, and I got involved in it because a nutritionist that was investigated, she had a nutritional consulting business for 30 years, and she had been investigated this year for practicing dietetics without a license, and she is extremely well educated. So the dietitian law was coming up for its annual 20-year repeal, and the nutritionist went in to expand the dietitian law to include the well-educated clinical nutritionist. And we said, well, when you do that, not only put in nutritionist licensing, but put in the health freedom law for everybody else that's not got that big education, that's not a clinical nutritionist, so you can put the health freedom language in there. And what happened? They knew that if they put that freedom language in, they wouldn't get the nutritionist licensing in. So they didn't get the health freedom language in, and they got the nutritionist licensing in, but now there's still no health freedom there. So we got a little bit of expansion, getting more clinical nutritionists to be able to practice instead of just dietitians, but we don't have health freedom because there was that same conflict. If I bring you on board, then my bill's not going to get passed. So the Americans are not working together. I mean, we had 30 citizen lobbyists down there trying to get the amendment on for health freedom, but they were not working in line with the clinical nutritionists because they didn't want to talk to us because we would have slowed down their bill.
We need a model to follow. We need some leadership that can, as you have done, that other people can watch the steps that you have taken to gather this force, to unite all the different factions and groups, to learn how to be a good activist, to learn how to be a lobbyist like you did. We only have a short amount of time left to today's show, and I want to give you an opportunity to everyone to say a few words at the end. One of my questions was, how do you respond to people who keep repeating over and over again untruths? I mean, I find that very difficult to deal with.
Well, that is one of the tricks that advertising agencies use. They repeat lies repeatedly, and after a while, the public buys those lies.
Yes, and my question is, do we have to just keep repeating our message and getting it out there like the NVIC, the National Vaccine Organization, they just put out billboards, and now they're getting attacked for putting out billboards to say, check the risks. Are there any risks? Just learn, educate yourself. I mean, we're getting shut down just to become educated.
Well, fortunately, in this country, we still have the freedom of speech, which allows everyone to express their opinion and their beliefs. And I do think that it is our responsibility to get the word out and also to help educate the public about some of the issues like we're doing here in this program. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to get the word out on this, because these are not easy things to understand. They're actually quite complex. They're complicated. But I do think we can, as those people out there, and I think there are many, maybe perhaps even the majority, that are looking for access to alternative care, I think we can be heard if we let our voice, if we get our voice out there to our legislators. I think we do need to get active. We at the North American Society of Homeopaths are planning to have a local group in every single state that is vocal and expresses and acts as the voice of those folks out there that are looking for alternative care in hospitals, in emergency rooms, during labor, during pregnancy. There's so many areas where homeopathy actually does so much better than conventional medicine. Look at all the drugs that pregnant women are given, and the devastating effects they have on the fetus, on the mother, and this has to change. Homeopathy is one of those rare, unique systems of care that could solve many things, such as an infection during pregnancy could easily be handled by a homeopathic treatment. Here's a form of care that simply works better. Look at ear infections of children. Even conventional medical doctors, professors of medicine, studies have found that antibiotics simply don't work for ear infections. But so many other methods of care work very well. Why not have everything? Why not have at our fingertip the full range of therapies that are currently available to deal with our health problems? And many of them would be provided at a much more economical cost than some of these outrageously expensive medical drugs.
Would you like to respond, Diane, to that?
Well, I think your question, thank you so much, Manfred. I agree 100%. And I think the question that you asked of what about when people tell you untruths, and that is the hurdle. Even, okay, say that a truth for me is not a truth for you. I want the freedom to research that on my own. I want the freedom to access it if that's what I decide. And I know that I was in a legislative hearing one time and somebody said, well, what about all these homeopaths that are scamming people because there's really nothing in the medicine? And I looked at the legislator in front of this committee and I said, I don't really care if you think homeopathy works or what you think is in it. I want to use it if I think it is valuable to me. And that's what this conversation is about. The conversation is about what I think I need when I am in crisis. And that's different for everyone. So I encourage people to, when they're hearing untruths, they say, well, you know what, give it a try. Or, give them all the evidence. I mean, if you get into the evidence battle, you could spend 5 years trying to decide whose research is better than each other. So I try to stay out of that conversation and say, but it's my choice. It's my family's choice, and it's not going to hurt me. If I think it's dangerous, that's what government's for. Otherwise, I get to do it.
So basically we're saying that is your belief system, and this is my belief system. And, we have the right to, it is spiritual. This is our personal philosophy of what we're able to do, what we can practice for ourselves, for our body. It is our freedom to take care of our body. Unfortunately, we are incurring these laws now, which are taking away some of these freedoms. Alan Phillips, who is on each Thursday with me, tells us that in North Carolina we have a bill now that takes away our guardianship of our children, because if they go to school and they can consent to taking a vaccine, we've just lost our right as a parent to take care of our children the way we believe religiously and philosophically. So this is what's frightening to me. But I agree. We just have to stay away from the argument and just stick with our freedoms, our rights, our legal rights. Is anybody there?
Yep, we're all here and we're all with you.
We're all with you.
We're all together, and all together we can do this. If the United States citizens can do this, we will survive. If we can't, and we are going to be asleep, or we're going to be on drugs, or we're going to be shopping, or we're going to have other things that'll take our time away from protecting the freedoms that this grand experiment of liberty and freedom started, we will lose it. We have to work for it.
Okay, we're coming. I thank you so much. We're coming to the close of today's programming. This has been a special for the Health Inn called Health Freedom, a new solution for the American healthcare dilemma, with Diane Miller, Director of Law and Public Policy, the National Health Freedom Action, and also Mr. Manfred Mueller, MA, DHM, RSOM, CCH, and the president of NASH. You've got a lot of initials. And he's just a wonderful advocate for health freedom, a good friend, a fantastic homeopath. And I have a couple quotes we're going to end with. This one is, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an underground dictatorship. To restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others will constitute the Bastille of medical science. And part 2 of that is, and I have to refresh my page to get to it, all such laws are un-American and despotic and have no place in a republic. The Constitution of this republic should make special privilege for medical freedom as well as religious freedom. That is a quote from Dr. Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence, meaning they had foresight into human nature, foresight into what man will try to pull over the eyes of another person. And we must fight for our freedom. It means everybody must stand up, must call their friend who has a like-minded belief system, that we want to be able to give everybody the freedom to choose whatever it is for their body, mind, and spiritual health. And I'm going to go ahead and say our gratitude to Amnon for letting us go long on today's show, Diane Miller, Manfred Mueller, and also waving out there across the ocean to Dr. Deepak Sharma, who tunes in as my regular co-host. Next week, I'm wishing everybody a wonderful day. It is going to be Easter. We won't have a show. Following that, April 8th, Renita Herman is going to talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome trauma, which happens to be the theme, and I just remembered the theme of the 8th Annual Joint American Homeopathic Conference in 2013. I'm going to be there. Manfred's going to be there. Meeting the Challenge, Successful Outcomes in Homeopathic Practice, April 19th through 21 in 2013 at Reston, Virginia. I do believe you can still get a seat to go to that conference. There are going to be hundreds and hundreds of people. There are going to be fabulous homeopaths, scientists, researchers, naturopaths, acupuncturists, chiropractors. Everybody's going to be there. It's going to be wonderful. On April 15th, Misha Norland from the UK is going to talk about spirit and homeopathy. April 22 for Earth Day, Dr. Robert Bruck, PhD, my better half, I'm going to say today. He's going to talk about global warming, most likely, since that is his specialty. April 29th, my other dear Blog Talk Radio co-host on Wednesday at 11 a.m. is Dr. Adil Chimthalawala Kasim, cardiologist. I know he'll do a fantastic presentation. Thank you for being with us.
Debbie, this is a 1 year of Health In.
This is 1 year of Health In. Wow.
Yes, the first date is 26th March of 2012.
Wow, one full year.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Health In.
We'll light
Thank
a
you.
candle. And tonight we're going to say our prayers and open the door for Elijah, and hopefully something good, essence, and spirit will come in to everybody's door, because we need our freedom. Okay.
Thank you so much.
See you in a couple of weeks. We love you. Lots of love to everybody. Until the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. till noon. Carrie's Psychic Cafe with Carrie Silkowski, Sundays 8 till 9 p.m. Health Inn with Debbie Bruck, Mondays 11 a.m. till noon. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 till 9 p.m. One Chic Mama with Mary Michelle, Wednesdays 4 till 5 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays 9 till 10 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.